Hello, I'm Dr. Sandal, founder of Atma Clinic. The modern medical system is falling apart. To fix it, we need to change how we think about health, illness, and the practice of medicine. Welcome to the show, Talking Shift, where we discuss radical new perspectives on health, illness, and the practice of medicine. Joining me today is David Lovely, Integrative Therapist with Atma Clinic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always good to be here.
So today, I wanted to talk with you and get your perspective about the role of socialization in health. Having relationships, being part of community. I think this came onto everybody's radar around the pandemic when there were lockdowns.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, what kind of was the status quo got upended and people were surprisingly isolated. And I don't at first think that people realized the toll that this was going to take on them. And now in retrospect, we have the silver lining effect of being able to really think about how important that is, right? In negative, when we lost that, we're like, wait a minute, there's really something there.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of dig into that because even nowadays, 4 years past that event, people, I think on a lot of levels, still struggle to interact socially. I mean, it kind of left scars and changes in our society.
For sure.
And it's important for us to have those all relationships, familial relationships, family relationship, work relationships. And there's something magic about being in person with someone that I think everyone will appreciate Zoom missed, right? You know, Zoom was fine, great, cool, but like everyone felt a lack. I want to talk about that a little bit today and the magic of human interaction.
Human connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Yeah. Real good point. I don't know that we, while we were going through it, really recognized like how impactful this is to our overall well-being, not being in community or in connection with people.
Kind of stunning, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah. And stunting. I mean, just detrimental to not have that ability to be able to connect. And I know in just my own personal walk, like having that connection, being able to sit with a human being and vibe with them, feel the connection and share in just this it's more than a conversation. I mean, it's a dance of energy that is really impactful, is very beneficial for my system, for me. Like without that, it's like there's something missing.
Yeah, one of the senses that you would engage isn't being engaged.
Yeah.
Even though we don't have a name necessarily for that sense.
Yeah.
Some data that goes missing.
Yeah. You know, and so how important is that for people's overall health and well-being to be able to have that connection? Because there are some of us who are introverted. There are some of us who are, extroverted, and that's where we get our, we thrive in those capacities. And so I think there is a level of like being able to look at oneself and saying like, what's right for me in relationship with family, friends, work, social. Yes. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think everyone's familiar with the terms introvert and extrovert, but I think there aren't good functional definitions. People go, well, yeah, but what is that? Am I this? Am I that? And I often think about extroverts as people who are charged up by social interaction, and introverts as people who feel a little drained. They have a social battery, so to speak. And that's kind of an interesting term, kind of useful term, but it's also, I believe, to be really misleading in a lot of ways. People kind of take that mantle and like, oh, I'm an introvert, therefore I am this way. And to your point, that becomes limiting. It's not their own personal calibration. They take a concept upon themselves and become that thing. And these things are complicated, right? The pandemic and the lockdowns, I think, proved that. People were like, oh, a little bit of solitude, no biggie. And then pretty quickly people go, I'm not feeling so hot. Like, this is very affecting. And so it's not as simple as categories. It's not as simple as the way it should be. There's a lot of nuance and dynamicism to human interaction that is super personal.
Yeah. I do appreciate like the kind of the separating out the term introvert, extrovert, and really looking at like what is your energy with interaction? Are you charged? Are you depleted? Are there, because I consider myself, if I was using those terms, an introverted extrovert. Like I thrive in connection, but I also thrive in solitude. And so having that balance, I think it is a very personal thing. And how much time and attention do we give, or do we allow ourselves or other people to discover that and think about that? Because there is so much pressure of like, you need to be so involved and so engaged in these activities and go out and do things that might not be like resonant for your energy.
I like your point there. An introverted extrovert or extroverted introvert. I think that gets closer to the point that I was going for there is like when we think about those terms, they're interesting terms, but they're not necessarily good terms because they make people feel like they are just one way or they can just be one way. But the reality is that there's a spectrum there, and we are all somewhere in the middle of that. We're all introverted extroverts or extroverted introverts. People who feel like they claim an identity of extroversion, they end up being imbalanced. And people who claim a identity of introversion can end up being imbalanced.
Yeah.
And in lockdowns, extroverts obviously were like, whoa, I hate this. And I talked to a lot of introverts who were like, this is great. I get to work on my garden. This is chill. I'm having a good time. And then 2 weeks in, it's like, it's fine. Yeah. And then 4 weeks in, they're like, I'm miserable. And so even an introvert, at some point wants that social interaction. Yeah. So there's a balance that I think has to happen there that it's just a matter of finding our own personal level at that time. We need both social interaction and we need our own solitude. It's a healthy balance.
Yeah.
One thing that I see very often is people who take on energy from other people. And I know that sounds a little woo, but what I mean is that when we interact with someone, the degree to which we feel for them determines how exhausted we are from that interaction. And I think everyone has the experience of being with someone who is really kind of, they need a lot. And there are some people who are like, that's great, good luck, see you later. And other people are like, oh gosh, let me sit with you and care for you. And I find that going back to this idea of introversion, extroversion, and a balance, extroverts tend to have more boundaries. Introverts tend to have fewer boundaries. And so the social interaction just is literally more costly for them. They're like, okay, I'm tanked.
Yeah.
Like I can't talk to anybody else. That was too much for me. And I don't think we have basically any good cultural education about these things.
Yeah.
People who are natural empaths, and there's a lot of people out there who are, highly sensitive persons or natural empaths. They don't get trained that they have to reel that in.
Yeah.
And they think of themselves almost universally as introverts because they constantly tap into this exhaustible resource and they don't balance that. Just like you're describing the extroverted introvert. It's like, that's a balanced place to be. We can have both of those things when we think carefully about how to control all of that and refine all of that and grow all of that and kind of come into actualization in between those two things.
Yeah. I like the word you said there, refinement. And for some of us, for many people that I talk to who consider themselves highly sensitive person or empaths, myself included, I didn't know.
All right.
But like, there's not a lot of education. There's not a lot of information. And if there is, or if you talk about it, people are like, well, I don't understand that. That's out there. But I think that there needs to be like a space to be able to have that education, have that awareness, have that conversation that, if I'm being drained, like if I'm around people and I'm taxed, like I'm picking up on.
Yeah.
There are things we walk around in a sea of energy. Of when human bodies are around each other, those are energy fields. And they're going to impact us. And if we don't have an awareness of like, oh, what's my energy? What's not my energy?
Right.
Oh, I have tools to be able to like protect my energy or not have it be so porous. And I can navigate the world in a way that I feel like safe, secure, confident in my own energy. It's like, that makes a world of a difference for people.
I agree.
And so
important topic.
Bringing that awareness or having that conversation. And it's beautiful to see people like, oh my gosh, like that's like, I get I get goosebumps. You know, it's like, wow, and so, yeah, having that be a part, because that too, then if I am an introverted extrovert, or maybe just more on that spectrum of an introvert, if I have that awareness and I begin to cultivate and refine tools that protect my energy, it's a whole different story when I'm around other individuals. I may have more bandwidth.
Yeah, and you get the strength from that without as many costs for it. It's a beautiful thing.
And two, at the end of that, you're not like, oh my gosh, I need a nap for a week.
Right.
You know, it's like, oh.
I think there are a lot of introverts who can relate with that. And what you're saying, if you don't mind me paraphrasing, is that if you're that sort of individual who feels like that after social interactions, there's work that you can do, there's practices you can do that strengthen you against that feeling. You can create a practice in which you get all the benefits of that with none of the negatives, which is cool. And again, nobody talks about that culturally.
Yeah.
But it's an amazing skill set. It's cool to be highly sensitive. And also, we have to bound ourselves in and have a way to distinguish what energy we want to pick up and not.
Yeah.
And I want to kind of throw out one quick thing here, because I think some people, pretty much any highly sensitive person listening to this is like, yeah, I get that. For the other people, they're like, that's woo-woo, energy fields, what are you talking about? So for those people, I'm going to throw in this idea. When we talk about picking up on an energy field, first of all, that's can be defined just using basic physics, right? We definitely have electromagnetic fields around us, and there are people who can become sensitized to those. You can actually sense electromagnetic changes with enough practice. Even if you don't want to talk about basic physics, it's a psychosocial phenomenon where reading body language, so there are different layers without having to resort to, woo-woo stuff, which I'll tell you, I actually endorse for complicated reasons, which I can get into on some video.
Yeah.
But, even if you're kind of a hard-nosed skeptic, there's a lot to what David's saying there.
And two, I'm glad that you put that piece in there, because the opposite side for an extrovert, someone who thrives on energy and is just, maybe it's unintentional. Sometimes it can be like those needy people. I am included in that. I know that I can pull energy and like be my own, like trying to source from other people to get a boost, right? And so there's also that other piece of the extrovert of just having, I like how you layered it out, right? There's different layers, so it's not all that, but awareness of like my own energy, and am I taking it? And how is this, or am I being able to generate this excitement, this energy, and this capacity where I can show up, be in this in this way without like sourcing
something to them, rather than
just taking and sourcing and depleting.
And that's an amazing skill for extroverts. If extroverts can begin to bring that energy in from somewhere else rather than pull the temperature out of the room.
And it creates more of a balanced.
Yeah.
I mean, both sides, right? If the introvert is protecting their energy in a way that is like they're not being drained or taking on what's not theirs, and again using those terms, just as the extrovert is also
terms,
right? Yeah, is aware of the temperature and not just again taking. Like the vibe everywhere is.
And I think most people have the experience of knowing someone who's just a great frickin' human being. Everyone loves being around this person. It's easy to be around them. They're supportive. It's not a drain. Even if you're a severe introvert, someone probably who's like, oh, that person is fine to be around. And they're usually people who find that balance that you're describing there. They're either an extrovert who's tamed that and knows how to bring in something else, or they're an introvert who knows how to hold their boundaries. And they meet in the middle of that spectrum, and that's a balanced human being.
Yeah.
Balanced
human, balanced energy field. You're right. And it's wonderful to be around. It's just easy.
Everyone gets pumped up by that.
Easy.
Yeah. And the thing is that going back to the genesis of this conversation, introvert and extrovert are terms that can lock people into places that aren't healthy. And so wherever you might fall on that spectrum, realize that it's entirely within your control and practice to come into that mid spot where you will feel like $1,000,000 being there.
Yeah.
And everyone around you will appreciate it. They'll go, man, being around David, I just feel good. That comes from having that balance. It's exciting. It's cool. I wish that there was more cultural education about this. It's kind of a good social hygiene. It's almost like I'm thinking like home ec in high school, like how do we, like let's build like some just life skills here, guys. Wood shop.
Energy hygiene.
Yeah.
People, there are, gifted practitioners and people out there who teach and talk about energy hygiene.
Oh, that's interesting.
And,
Yeah. How do you know when you're feeling someone's energy? If someone is listening to this and they're going, well, I'm over here, and I want to be in here. How do I gain that sensation of that? What are your thoughts? What's your advice to someone who's wanting to start that project?
I think a place to begin in trying to recognize or know like the differentiation between what's mine and what's somebody else's is first like becoming familiar with like what is your energy.
That's great. Yeah.
And that in and of itself can be, a
challenge.
Of self-exploration and reflection. And gosh, like the pathway to that, one of the ways that I find helpful in being able to have people connect to that is the energy work that I practice in source point therapy. It's a beautiful way to be able to, these are just descriptors, right? These are not identifiers. They're just trying to point towards, but to separate out like what's yours and what's not yours. Like what is your energy? What does that feel like? What are the sensations with that? How does that engage and interact in your body versus like if I'm sitting in a room, I think we all have this experience where we can sense or feel somebody's energy. When you walk into a room and someone is angry, like you can see that, you can feel that, like it's just very clear that, oh gosh, I'm gonna kind of avoid that corner over there. Like that's a clear indication of like, that's not mine,
Right.
And then there are questions one can ask themselves to kind of differentiate and separate out. Like if I'm feeling like anxious, I like to ask myself, like, is there a reason? Is there a concrete reason? I mean, there's collective anxiety, right? But is there a reason I should be feeling anxious? Is there something that I haven't done? Am I worrying about something? Is that something occupying a large part of my consciousness? And if not, okay, that's not mine. That's some other energy or someone else's that I've picked up or I've walked into an environment and I have cultivated and developed practice. I can release that. I'm not going to carry that. That's not mine. I'm not partnering with that. I'm not identifying with that. Like I have no reason to. My field is clear.
I love that. And I think a lot of that practice starts with, as you said, just considering that there can be energy that is ours and energy that isn't ours. Like even just knowing that that's possible and people hit the pause button and go, okay, hang on, let me just ask that question. Yeah. I'm feeling really tense right now or anxious or angry or sad or whatever. Like, okay, what if that is mine? And what if that is come from somewhere else? And just asking that question out loud and kind of, really doing that diligence and then sitting with that, we start to discover stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the really cool things about this, about the concept of energy work. Again, call it electromagnetic physics, call it social cues, call it energy work. It exists on all these levels. I hope that everyone can play with that idea, suspend your disbelief and consider that it could be a real thing. One of the really cool things about all of those is that it's such a obviously productive practice. The payoff is so immediate. If we can consider that might be a real thing, and we do an exercise as simple as, okay, how am I feeling right now? What if that is mine? What if that is not mine? Really simple thought experiment. It's exciting because we go, oh, I just learned something. And that accelerates very rapidly. It opens up a whole bunch of other questions. And that's a wonderful way to begin even the journey of self-discovery. Like, who the heck am I? And how do I find my own personal satisfaction stems from that very same thing. It's a fascinating point, right? Like this is a fundamental practice. Talk about home ec or wood shop as a necessary thing. It's like, no, this is like gym class. This is like elementary school. Like we should help people realize that they can build this awareness of themselves as opposed to their environment, because those things are sneaky. They sit on us and we absorb them and we go, oh, I am an anxious person. It's like, well, or are you Neela and you have anxiety because you just watched the news? Right? Like, oh,
Or you just walk through a big box store with,
Right.
yeah. It's like, yes. Yeah. There's a part of me that wants to geek out and really lean into this. And so I'm like, I'm tempering. I can
we'll do it sometime.
Yeah. It's like,
We'll deep dive into the science of all this. And
and what arises or what comes. So this is fun though. This is a nice little like dip your toe in. Yeah.
Well, why don't we leave people then with a little bit of an exercise? Anybody who's watching this and you guys are thinking, okay, that's interesting, or nah, that's hocus pocus, but I'm curious, I'll try it. Try an exercise where you just close your eyes and join me on this now, or pause the video after the instruction as you like. Close your eyes, watch your breath, and ask the question, how am I feeling right now? And then ask the question, what of that is me? And what of that isn't me? And sit with that. It's a great place to start. David, as always, a pleasure.
So fun.
Thank you very much. Stimulating conversation. We'll keep at it.
Okay.